products, will also be moving people, but currently drones are pretty much more like IoT devices. We're looking at services, components, and counter drones and drone service providers. Okay, let's talk regulations. The regulatory environment, if you want to set up a drone business, you got to go through these 4 hoops. Okay, the first one, you got to make sure that as a business, you've got pilots who are qualified, who are licensed by the Civil Aviation Authority. Basically, to get a pilot license, you would go into one of the accredited flight schools and go through that process. Between a period of 6 to 8 weeks, you would get your pilot license. But your company, even once after your company has been registered with SIPS, you have to go through the Department of Transport and get the air services license. And then you get your drones, and your drones must be registered, just like any aircraft in the manned aviation industry has to be registered. And finally, Civil Aviation Authority has to license your operations, and you'll get what we call RPAS operating certificate. By the way, the term RPAS, remote piloted aircraft system, it's a term that the regulator uses for a drone. Okay, we prefer the drone. Let's talk about the bad and the ugly of drone industry. There are a lot of rogue drones that are being flown out there. Drone, you're familiar with December 2018, the Gatwick drone gate, whereby drones put a stop to flights at Gatwick, and they created problems. There's an encroachment into protected airspaces. There's the issue of national security, and the drones. We know how drones, they got their bad name from the wars in the Middle East, and it's also a major risk to manned aircraft. If a drone were to collide with a manned aircraft, it can bring that aircraft down. And then you look into issues of cybersecurity and security and privacy. I know people are very concerned if a drone is flying over your property, what type of data that drone is collecting. If we move now, as we know, drone is a new technology that is evolving on a regular basis. I don't know if you guys are familiar with this Gartner hype cycle. Gartner is every year they produce a hype cycle of major technologies. Every technology, whether it's 3D, whether it's augmented reality, virtual reality, it starts off as a technology innovation trigger. And then people will write about it and say all the things they need to say in the media, and they move into what we call the peak of inflated expectations. But then when people realize that, hey, there's no money to be made here, and then people become disillusioned. I mean, we are seeing the same thing happening currently with the whole concept of fourth industrial revolution. Yes, in the past 2 years, there's been a hype of expectations, but people are saying, hey, is this thing going to put food on the table? And then you move into what we call the trough of disillusionment. And then from here, this technology could either die, or it could basically resurrect itself and turn the corner and move into slope of enlightenment, and finally the plateau of productivity. This is where the drone industry is. Back in 2017, there's a lot that has happened. Sometimes various technologies, they take years to move from here to here, but the drone industry from 2017 to now, it has moved into the slope of enlightenment. We're seeing some new changes in this. Now let's talk about any new technology that gets adopted in the industry. You see, for instance, there would be early adopters, particularly the innovators. Innovators, these are people who are open to any new thing. They will try this, but these people in the marketplace, there's just 2.5%. And then you have early adopters, the people who appreciate the technology, and they're going to move in here. But you're not going to form a business out of early adopters. This is where everything is happening. But you got to be knowing how to deal with the early majority, the late majority, and the late laggards. If you look at the cell phone industry has basically covered just about all this market. If we basically take the Gartner curve and plug it into the adoption life cycle, you see this big chasm, this big gap, where this is, we call the early market, and this is the mainstream market. Most businesses will want to be here, but obviously they have to start here. What is the importance of all these 5 groupings? Let's get into them and explain what happens? Innovators, these are the enthusiasts. They are not interested in seeing, they're not interested in seeing the product work, but they just want to try new things. And then you got the early adopters, 13%. These are visionaries. They're willing to try new things. But then you've got early majority who are pragmatists. They want to see the full solution. They're not interested in something that is still being developed. And then you have the late majority. These are conservative who play a wait and see game. They're going to be influenced by the early majority. And then lastly, these are the skeptics who will only change if they have no choice. So you've got two markets. You've got the early market and you've got the mainstream market. Drone industry finds itself here at this point in time. We are yet to move into mainstream market, which is why, for instance, even the police services in South Africa, it's only now that they are beginning to think about it. These are the people in the early majority that we want to interest. Okay, now let's talk about how to cross this chasm of the drone industry. There's a book, this is inspired by a book written by Jeffrey Moore, we're basically saying you transition for how to transition from early to mainstream market. The great chasm, basically, what happens here is that that divide, this is where, for instance, startup businesses fail, and where because they fail to validate their products in the marketplace, there is no product market fit. This is where, if you look at the Gartner curve, we are still sitting in the trough of disillusionment. As you move, now, if we look at now startups, I'm now going to talk about startups and professionals. If you want to build a career into drones, or you want to start up your business, this is an area that I'm passionate about, because we are helping a drone startup to find product market fit and work in this industry. We've got startups that we are training in this space. What we're saying, the things that you've got to do, you've got to fall in love with the customer problem. Number one problem, or the underserved need. You've got to understand the drone technology life cycle, the fact that we are still now in the early market. We have not moved into the latter market. You've got to understand that the target market and the segment within the target market that you're working with. You've got to know the current solution. Who's providing that solution? Who's your competition? If you want to bring a drone technology, for instance, to police services to monitor protest, you must understand what technology they're using currently. You'll find that they're using a helicopter, which is very expensive, whereas a drone can do a far better job, much more efficiently and very, very much cost effective. You got to test and validate your solution in the marketplace. You got to start with the minimum viable product and build your product from there. And ultimately, you got to iterate until you reach problem solution fit. Just make sure that your solution, it addresses the customer's number one problem. Okay, now let's look at the young professionals, technicians, graduates, people who are actually looking into this industry. The nice thing about the drone industry is that even if you have the matric certificate, you can go and get your drone pilot license. As long as you can pass the English proficiency test, you will be able to get your pilot license. And then what we are saying here is that if you want to get into this industry, be an expert in your field of specialization. When I say your field of specialization, you might be coming from agriculture, you might be coming from construction, but you need to be a specialist in that space. And then when you go, so that when you implement, you integrate the drone technology, you must come from an understanding of where you are, whether it's security, whether it's a construction, agriculture, you must know how you implement your drone technology there. You must know the technology limitations. Drones are not a panacea. They can't do everything. You've got to know where the limitations are as far as drone industry. You'll find that certain technologies are better off without the drone industry. So drones can't do everything. Be the innovator and early adopter in your field. If you are in agriculture, be the innovator, bring this technology. And I know you'll find that there are skeptics in there, but just be relentless and bring the technology and try new things, because we are developing new cases more and more. I mean, we didn't know, for instance, that you could use a crop spraying drone that is used in agriculture to disinfect public places. I mean, in future, you're going to take a stadium like Moses Mabhida and disinfect it, because when people get back to to stadium. There's still going to be a need to disinfect. This thing is not going, COVID-19 is still going to be with us for the next 12 to 18 months. So people will need to disinfect those places. And that is a new use case that didn't exist before. You got to invest in a drone pilot course, okay? Go to an accredited school and get yourself an entry-level drone, okay? You get a course which will take you about 6 to 8 weeks. A drone pilot cost is far cheaper than an aircraft pilot. An aircraft pilot, you're probably going to pay close to R1 million. But a drone pilot cost, it would probably cost you around 20,000. But we are working to take this course online so that it costs less than 10,000 Rand. So, but we can talk about it at a later stage. And then get yourself an entry-level drone. An entry-level drone will set you back between 20 to 30,000 Rand. You know, you get that drone and start doing some work. Start doing some work, but make sure that you work legally. Know all there is to know about the regulations. Now, the regulations are a big issue. This is the elephant in the room. You've got to know what drones can do and what drones can't do. And then lastly, above all, have fun with this technology. I mean, this is a very exciting technology. Yes, there are concerns about it, but this is a highly interesting technology. All I can say is that what we are working with right now within the drone industry is we're working in building drone startups, which is the startup businesses and SMMEs, to get into this industry, because this industry, we're going to move from the early market into the later market, into the mainstream market. And that is going to happen within the next 2 to 3 years. And that's why we term this the decade of the drone. And our question to you today is that when you are in retirement, what stories will you be telling your grandkids? And on this note, I'd like to thank you, and I'd like to thank Moses Kotane and Mrs. Tandega Ellenson for having given us the opportunity to speak to you. There's a lot and lots that I can talk to you guys about as far as the drone industry and drone technology is concerned. But I'd like you to connect with you guys. You can find me on LinkedIn, and or you can find us on this website. And yeah, have fun. And thank you so much, Ms. Ellenson, and thanks for inviting us to join you on this webinar.
Thank you so much, Mr. Hadebe, for that informative session. I have a comment or a question from Dr. Ezra Masenya, who's saying if you can please elaborate more on the health, on the issues of drones and health.
Okay. One of the use cases that has been growing, even maybe before I come to COVID-19, prior to that, there's been a lot of testing in places like Rwanda, whereby you deliver you do medical deliveries. And I've spoken to you, Ms. Ellenson, that one of the entities that we're working with, the National Blood Service, wants to trial blood deliveries, particularly in remote areas. And we are saying, maybe let's not just stop with transporting blood, so that when a drone moves from a district hospital to a healthcare center in the further rural areas, let it go and probably also take some chronic medication and probably bring back medical samples to be tested and take results back, so that people who are like chronic medication, they don't have to wait too long for their medication. We can trial that right now. And the reason we're talking about probably rural areas is because the airspace is clear there. There's not much movement there. That is prior to COVID-19. But as far as COVID-19 is concerned, with social distancing, we've seen drones being used to address people, and we've seen drones being used to disinfect public places. So there are a lot of use cases. I know there are other use cases that are probably a stretch, where people are saying you can use drones to check people's temperatures. Yes, we've got a thermal sensor that we can put on a drone to do that. But we are on that one, we are saying, hey, there's probably a much more cheaper way to do that than just put it on a drone. You want to put on a drone whereby you can monitor people and monitor social distancing. But at the same time, you got to be mindful of privacy issues so that people don't feel that their privacy rights are being trampled on.
All right. Oh, we have more questions coming in. Mr. Kolobe Mona is saying the industry has a potential to create many job entrepreneur opportunities and entrepreneurial opportunities, especially in the coastal province such as KZN. However, the regulation and the legislation on aviation is making it impossible, you know, for this to happen rapidly. So he's asking us to, what are the future prospects of relaxing the legislation, particularly on the entry level, so that we make sure that the SMMEs participate in this industry?
Look, there's not going to be any relaxation of the regulations. Simple reason is that if you look at South Africa, we've got probably the best safety record in Africa, not only in Africa, even in developing world. We've not had a commercial aircraft crash in a very long time, probably more than 50 years, okay? And it's because we have a very, very strong safety record as far as that is concerned. It's easy to regulate aircraft. Drones bring a whole new dimension into it, okay? Because drones, currently, the air traffic control system is unable to detect drones, okay? Because some of the drones could be as small as my fist. And we are also, even in the industry, we are not saying, the issue is not about relaxing the regulations. The issue for us is to get the markets to open up. If we can get the markets to open up, the Civil Aviation Authority, we are saying, yes, the regulations are there, but they need to be enforced more, because over 90% of the drones that are being flown out there, they're being done illegally. And unfortunately, even government departments, some of the government entities are buying drone services from providers that are not accredited by the regulator. So there's a lot that is happening there. So for me, we want to see the drone industry crossing the chasm from the early market to the mainstream market. We want to see more and more adoption of the drone industry, and regulations. We can work around regulations. It can happen, but we just got to be able to do it correctly, because the last thing you want is a drone that's going to be doing surveillance, collecting information that it shouldn't be collecting.
Yeah. All right. I think let's take one but last round of questions. Hinsa Mhlane is saying, good presentation. Will it be available? Yes, we will be uploading the presentation on the Moses Kotane website. Plus, it will be available via the link on our social platforms. We're talking Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. And then there's Nkosinati Komzwayo. Is from Ilembe, is saying that they're trying to engage or use the drone technology, especially in the agricultural sector. I think this is just a comment. We have, okay, an unnamed person who's asking if the drones can do deliveries in hospitals in the cities. We have Dr. Felix Kutame, who's asking, what is the longest distance the drone can fly from the source? And then, yeah, I think we'll address those for now, and then we'll take the last round and then close the session.
No, thank you very much. A drone can fly up to whatever distance. It's a question of whether the regulations can allow. Currently, you're not allowed to fly the drone beyond vision line of sight. However, licensed drone operators can get permission from the CAA. Currently, the longest that CAA is allowing is 25 kilometers. But until such time that they are proven that you can take all the safety precautions, you will be able to fly 100 kilometers, because if you want to apply the drone technology in places like a pipeline, looking at pipeline, it's important for you to do that. And also when you want to do border control in where you're looking at long stretches, you need a drone that can fly 100 kilometers, 200 kilometers. So that is possible. It's just that the technology, even the regulator, it's still finding its way in terms of how they can do that. And by the way, it's good to see people like Dr. Mzansi, who's there. I've worked with Dr. Mzansi in the aerotropolis space and in the area of education. And Mr. Nkomzo, we're working on trying to get an accelerator program in the Ilembe district. And there's a huge opportunity there from an agriculture side. So there's a lot that can be done with the drone industry, but it's got its limitations. But for us, we want to see the adoption of the technology in a mass scale. That will push the needle for the drone industry in KZN and in the rest of the country.
All right, we have a question from Advocate Mapipa, who's asking, what's the maximum regulated weight that drone can carry? And then we have Trevor Governor saying, as a biologist, what are the regulations to do vegetation studies? We have Timothy Fashion, who's saying, with improvement in satellite technology regarding monitoring, he's saying drones losing out on this. And then we have Lungile Mhlaba, who's asking, besides, agriculture, construction and health, can you use drones to collect data, say from the business enterprises and so on? And I think the issue of barriers in terms of license costs it has been addressed partially, but Samkelo Komo is asking about the costs in terms of the licensing, because he's purchased the drone, but it's a very difficult for him because he has to pay a lot of money for licensing. I think that's a round set of our questions.
Okay, I'm going to respond to these questions in no particular order. I'll start with the barriers to entry. I think barriers to entry as a startup, on barriers to entry as a young professional who wants to get into this industry. Yes, to do a pilot license, it currently costs about 25,000 Rand or more. And we ourselves have not been happy with that cost, because with 25,000 Rand, I'm sure you can get an honors degree or whatever. I don't know how much it costs. Okay. So we are working on digitizing the training of drone pilots, putting it into an online platform so that you can also, even the practical side of things, we're working on a simulation. So CAA, I'm glad it has given us a go-ahead with our partners in terms of, although it's a temporary measure because of COVID, we can train in platforms like this, but we want to make it permanent, because right now, if you want to train and be examined, you have to come to an urban area for you to be able to do that training. And we are saying, if there are people who are in outlying areas, they need to also have access to this. And yes, those costs happen to be a barrier to entry, but the biggest barrier to entry is regulations, but for a reason. So you just need, that's why we said, you need to understand part 101 of the drone regulations. Go to the CAA website, caa.co.za, download those regulations, study them, and consult with the legal people and let them help you decipher these regulations. On matters of monitoring, yes, when you talk of monitoring and surveillance of people, of course, there are issues that we've got to be mindful of, like privacy regulations. In terms of the Constitution, everything is guarded there. There's been a case in Paris, for instance, where a judge has put a stop on surveillance on COVID. But here's my question as far as the issue of privacy is concerned. There's so much surveillance that is happening through your smartphone. Okay. Maybe it's because a drone is not doing it as quietly as Google does, but there's far more surveillance. Right now, Google knows that we are all meeting in this year. So there's so much surveillance. It's just that a drone, it still needs to get acceptability. We understand that it started in a bad way with it's still killing people in the Middle East, and people are very, very wary with this bird of prey that is lurking in the sky waiting to pounce. So that for us, it's something that we're working on. On vegetation, drones are very good. With the drones that are being used in agriculture, if you want to, for instance, target alien species, you can use artificial intelligence, and the drone can learn how, you can even train it to identify certain weeds, and you can spray onto those weeds. There's a lot that you can do with drones. And I don't know, have I covered most of the question? In terms of the weight from Advocate Mopipa, as far as the weight it can carry, it's limited by what type of a drone you're talking about. Some of the drones are as small as this, and some of the drones can be as big as some of the small aircraft. So they range, it depends on what drone you have. But the biggest thing about drone at the moment, the use case for drones at the moment, it's nothing but an IoT device. It collects data. That is probably the 99% use of drones now. Yes, we're going to move into delivery drones and ultimately to move people. But right now, a drone is nothing but an IoT device.
All right, I think we ran out of time. We are 1 minute over. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Radebe, for that informative lecture on drones. And thank you so much to all our attendees. Unfortunately, we ran out of time, so we're unable to answer all these questions online. However, we will still remain and answer these questions offline. And thank you to the support team. God bless you. My name is Thandeka Ellenson. Goodbye.
Thank you.